So I was going through Army Reddit and I noticed a really interesting post. Lack of fieldcraft is one of the biggest threats in the entire US military right now. And I want to dissect this together and see how true or not true this actual threat is. Now, I have already been on record and have stated that the Army does not create survival experts. They pretty much give you the basics of what you need to know. But when breaking down this Reddit post, this guy expects more from the soldier. And again, we're going to see what makes sense and doesn't make sense. Let's get to it. So, first things first, what exactly is fieldcraft? This can be rather subjective. Some people think it's this, and some people think it's this. Fieldcraft is essentially the basics you need to know when going into a survival situation. How to build a tent, how to start a fire, things like that. Your basic knots. Okay, so starting off with the entire US military. Is the entire US military under threat from lack of fieldcraft? Does the majority of the Space Force need to know fieldcraft? Air Force, Navy. So I think majority is a little harsh. I think we are going to limit this more to the combat roles like combat engineers, infantry, Cav Scouts. I think that makes more sense for the soldiers or the military members who truly might need to know fieldcraft. Okay, on to the next part, and if you were never in the military, you still have an opinion, and I still want to hear your opinions, and I will break down these acronyms for you if it doesn't make sense. We spend so much time doing physical training, qualifying on a flat range, doing live fire exercises, yet the lack of fieldcraft is what is going to be the biggest gap in lethality. Is that true or not true? Now, I don't want to come off as too harsh or come off as like a know-it-all, but I'm just going to be honest. I don't think any of this has to do with fieldcraft. If anything, it has to do with battlecraft. Massive difference. Fieldcraft is implementing your survival skills within a field of environment. That can be urban or woodland, and then your battlecraft has to do with how you operate in the battlefield during combat operations. Totally different stuff, but I see where you're going with this, so let's move on to what you have to say. Let's continue. What is a squad going to do in an island hopping campaign if no one knows how to fish, fillet a fish, or desalinate water, or start a proper fire to stay warm? We might have a good argument here, or how to tie proper knots to rappel gear down a cliff, or build a hasty shelter out of branches and sticks to stay warm. Okay, so we can all see what this guy is trying to say. Why don't we have the basic survival skills to start a fire, rappel down a hill, tie a knot? Now, I do want to start off by saying this. Some soldiers do have those trained skills in specialty schools that the Army provides, such as Jungle Warfare School, SEER School, things like that. And some soldiers grew up in the woods of Kentucky, just as they say in this Reddit post. It is true, there's always like a couple guys in your unit who are already survival experts and grew up in the mountains. I grew up in the mountains of New York. I wasn't a survival expert, but I was definitely way more of an expert than the kid from New York City. So in this Reddit post, he's just asking, where are all these survival skills that we should be learning? Get ready for this shocking statement. The US military has historically almost never taught these amazing survival skills to the basic soldier. Now, let me explain and break down that statement. Now, I will use Army basic training as an example. The most basic fieldcraft you learn as a soldier, whether infantry, doesn't matter. In basic training, you learn how to build your hooch, which is like a tent. You learn how to use your MRE, your meal ready to eat. You are taught that water will typically be in your area. You learn the most basics of somewhat being comfortable outdoors with all of the materials provided to you. And guess what? This was also relevant depending on the time period you were serving in. So even if we go back during World War II, I even did a bunch of research. I can't find anywhere where these soldiers were like these survival experts. Sure, could they start a fire? Probably better than soldiers today? Yes, but they needed to do that. They didn't have these space heaters that we have today. I even went as far back as the colonial era. And one of my favorite YouTube channels is the Townsends, and they do a lot of reenactments and talk about the Revolutionary War and how soldiers operated in the woods. And oftentimes they say the soldiers hardly knew what they were doing out there. Almost no one knew how to cook. They would boil their pork. So again, this notion of depending on like how far back you lived as a person, it's not like you were a better survival expert. All that mattered was that you had the ability to live in the woods with the rest of your military unit. As soldiers, you learn standardization of how to operate in the field. This goes as far back as the Roman times. Again, I'm telling you, any era of time, there is standardization of how you operate. Because when it's time to rest, as we all know if you served, there are certain things you need to do. You need to first up set up your area, you need to clean your weapon, then you can eat, and then you pull security. This has been the same throughout all of military history. But I will say I totally see your point. Like, why don't we learn how to start fires? Why don't we learn, like, basic water knowledge? Yes, that makes sense. But let's be honest, the U.S. Army will probably not send you somewhere where you can't have helicopter support or send you off way too far where a logistics train can't get to you. Again, that's like Army 101. You don't send your guys somewhere where you can't send them supplies. And don't worry, we will get to some of the things I agree with, because I do think soldiers should learn these skills just to learn, but as a whole, it doesn't really make sense. So let's continue on this Reddit post. When the majority of the population comes the city and suburbs, so all they know is TikTok and lifting weights in an air-conditioned gym, this becomes a problem. 80 years ago, this wasn't a problem because it was part of common life for most American boys. Now it's not. A lot of soldiers don't even know how to use a jet boil, and leaders have seen this. So like I had stated before, I don't think the era you were a soldier has anything to do with the fieldcraft you learn. I will give it to him. You probably started more fires in World War II because the technology was different, even World War I, and obviously during the colonial era. But again, I can't find this correlation of era and fieldcraft in almost anything. Now, I will say, and I've seen it before, as a soldier, there definitely are times where the city kids are not as comfortable being outside. Like, the training that you learn in basic training means a lot to them, and they tend to absorb it maybe a little better than the already field crafters out there, because they need to know this stuff. They don't know their basic knots. They don't understand why you should lean your tent this way and not flat so the water doesn't fall in your tent. But on the flip side, what if we are operating in an urban environment? Now, the city kids know more about you, because during modern warfare, as we know, it's not all about fighting in the woods, fighting in the desert. A lot of operations end up in the city, end up in urban environments. So learning how to fish and start your fires, does that really matter when you are in an urban environment? So, look, I actually do agree with this Reddit post that maybe we should teach soldiers a little bit more than how to drink out of your water canteen and how to use your flameless heater. I don't see any issue with showing soldiers how to start a fire. I think that'd be really cool. Any education to the soldier does enhance the soldier's ability in the battlefield. But you run into problems if not every unit and everyone is on the same page of how you operate. Because if one unit works with a different unit and then you guys decide it's time to rest, everyone already knows how to set up your tents. You know exactly what you're doing. I haven't been in the Army in a while, but I could show up to a unit today and fit right in because of the standardized training that we all had. And I know what you're thinking, should we really rely on the logistics to hopefully get us food and get us water? That's what military operations have been about all the way back to the Roman times. There's always a threat to your supply chain. In fact, that's what's going on today in the Indo-Pacific region. So I see why people might be concerned, but at the end of the day, the threat assessment is there. Should we operate as far as we can from the main base with the logistics supply chain getting taken out? That's always the assessment. So let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed this video, let me know if I should keep reacting to Reddit posts. I've always been on the side of we were never survival experts. Some of us knew more than others, but I don't think we were like the Bear Grylls out there of soldiers. Let me know what you guys think. Leave your comments and opinions down below. Do we need to know more Fieldcraft?